I think while we're going through things, we certainly don't realize all of the feelings we're taking in. And whenever our children are in a mental health crisis, a loved one, someone we're, in charge of caring for, you try to have all the answers because over time we've learned that we are the ones that have the answers. It's our job to have the answers. And sometimes you may not have no experience whatsoever with a mental health crisis or a diagnosis. And you may be struggling with that generational trauma of mental health, of maybe someone not taking care of their mental health or them not understanding it. But I think something that we hear a lot of times all the way across the board is our parents get treated very clinically whenever they are approaching the RTFs, the emergency room, the crisis center. And we don't really get to process how much guilt we carry around. And having the opportunity to forgive yourself sometimes doesn't come until much, much later. And that whole time, you've been carrying around this guilt. And we're just human. We are parents, and we do know a great deal of things. There's some stuff that's just out of our scope. We don't know exactly what to do in a crisis, and we got to figure it out on the fly, like right then and there. And then once we get that knowledge, we think, well, okay, this will take care of everything. We'll be okay. And mental health isn't like that. I mean, sometimes you get that immediate care and it relieves a lot, but it's a process and it takes time. So I think whenever parents reach out to us, a big thing that they get from us is that shared knowledge between us as a parent and them is we understand there's more to this than just the logistics of picking an RTF. It's how we feel. Like we feel so bad and we feel so guilty about everything that's going on. And I feel like we need to forgive ourselves. We always say, like, give ourselves some grace. We say those things, but to truly do it and give yourself permission, it's okay that we didn't see that first sign. It's very easy to look back once you're past that crisis and say 2 weeks ago, a month ago, like you can see those things. I just think like we put so much pressure on ourselves. We think we are the ones that hold all that knowledge, but we're not. We got to learn as we go and, try to do better. And I think sometimes even our kids are actually mad at us because we didn't fix it real quick. We didn't know what the answer was. And that's okay too. That's okay if they're mad about that. But I think like giving yourself permission and saying, I'm going to forgive myself. I am. I'm going to forgive myself because I'm just human. I feel so bad for our parents that go through these things and feel terrible for their children. But I think there's more to it than just calling it a mental health crisis and just saying like my child went to RTF yesterday or they're in the hospital. There's so much that goes along with that. And sometimes we don't even give ourselves permission to unpack it. We're like, nope, just trying to get through. We're just moving forward. And I think that stays with you. I think we got to spend a lot of time forgiving ourselves.
Well, I know that for me, there's a big different time frame between my oldest and my youngest. There's like 13 years difference. And when my oldest was struggling with mental health, I did not know what I know now at all. Um, could she have been diagnosed earlier, with the ADHD and a lot of other diagnoses? Yes. Um, she spent time in an inpatient facility. Did not know what I know now. Absolutely not. And we talk about that between my daughter, my oldest daughter and myself, and that guilt is there. Like, because I've done so much with my youngest. I'm there, I'm her advocate. I'm, speaking up saying, no, this is not right, or we need to do this and we need to do better. And certainly we never had an IEP for my oldest. What was an IEP back then? Have no clue, but she struggled so hard in school, which probably escalated a lot of her mental health too. So that guilt is absolutely there, and forgiveness and talking to my daughter and saying, I'm sorry, I wasn't more, I wasn't there, to be able to fix things. And that hurts. That really, I mean, I can almost choke up because I could have done so much better, because I do that now. And I think it's a new concept, I think, of what this family support partners are, that peer support. And I think that oftentimes parents they don't probably understand what we do, because it's kind of a fairly new word, right? And so, like, when we started, like Melissa and myself, we were lead family contacts with system of care, and that really opened up the door for me to understand a lot more and get more involved. And to say, like, I'm not alone, and speak up with other parents to say, you're not alone and you shouldn't be alone. I can walk with you on this journey, because I was by myself and I don't want you to feel the same way. Yeah, mom guilt.
Sometimes I'll catch myself replaying something that happened when my kids were little. And you watch a lot of videos now on like gentle parenting, and I think it's all wonderful, and the skills that we're able to offer to parents who are raising their children now are fantastic. But two things occur to me. Number one, that wasn't the way it was when I was raising my children. There may have been pockets in the country that were practicing things like this, but it certainly wasn't well shared information. Now, in a world of social media, you can very easily, very quickly get your hands on a lot of information quickly. You can easily be exposed to new concepts and new ideas. I mean, back in the day, and I read constantly, but back in the day, it had to be a matter of going to a bookstore, looking for a parenting manual, reading
Mhm.
it, hoping it was good. There's a lot of stuff out there now that when people look back on it, like, oh my goodness, I don't know if you guys ever heard. I mean, luckily it wasn't stuffed down my throat, but how many of us heard like Dr. Spock and
Oh,
and and all those kind of parenting books written by people who, I mean, when you think about it, some old white dude who was, I mean, he was not in it day to day to certainly be telling anybody how to anything. Um, but yeah, I'll kind of think back and like, oh wow, maybe if I was able to go back in time with what I know now and handle it, I absolutely would have handled things differently. But also, I have to remind myself that at the time, you look back and maybe your life is in a different position. Maybe like now I don't have the money worries that I had when I was raising my kids. And I wasn't exhausted from not having slept for like through the night for years and years, Um, just all that kind of stuff. It's easy now for me, well rested, not worried about, are they going to turn my electric off, to say, oh, I totally would have approached parenting so much differently. Because now, if I had a kiddo, I would, because I'm in a different place.
yeah.
And so I think too, a lot of times you hear these people like should all over you. But they're probably not in the same position where a lot of parents are. It's really easy. I remember a particular time when my youngest was very curious, and somebody designed a refrigerator, probably thinking it was handy, with a knob right at the top in the front of the refrigerator, maybe in the center, to handle the temperature control. And my youngest, being curious, played with the knob and turned our refrigerator all the way down. Well, that's not anything you notice. And so one morning, we're frantically getting ready for school, and I take the butter out of the fridge and go to spread it on like an English muffin or whatever, and it spread really easily. And then it occurred to me, I'm like, wait a minute, did I just get that butter out of the fridge? Why did it spread so easily? And at that point, I realized that the refrigerator had been turned off. And it must have been turned off for long enough for everything in my refrigerator to get to room temperature, which now means that I have to throw out all of the food in my refrigerator. And I remember yelling at my kiddo. I'm like, you are never allowed to go into the kitchen again. It was like a little galley kitchen. You're never allowed to come into the kitchen again. You're never like, not like screaming like hysterically, but, loudly, never allowed to come into the kitchen again. If you want anything out of the refrigerator, you're going to have to ask before you get in there. And they took their little toast and they put it up and they hit me. Okay. Even in the moment, I recognize that, like, that is the cutest thing ever. At the time, I was a full-time college student and working full-time. And I go into class that day, and I had English. My English professor's like, you seem like you're in a really bad mood this morning. And I'm like, yeah, I had to throw out the entire contents of my refrigerator and my freezer this morning. And I said, I know I'm going to be able to laugh about this someday, but right now it's really hard because I did not have money to go out and replace everything in my refrigerator. So, I mean, it's different. I can laugh at it now. And while I would probably still be like a super, super annoyed, I wasn't in the same position of, oh my God, how am I actually going to feed my children? And so sometimes it's easy for people on the outside to give you grief about, oh, why were you so upset? And your child was probably like, how terrifying for the child that they're hiding behind their toast. I get it, although we're a loud family, and we're kind of hyperbolic, so they're probably used to it. Not saying that that's a good thing. But yeah, it's easy to judge other people if you're not walking in their shoes. And so many people who judge us as parents aren't living paycheck to paycheck, aren't operating on not like a full time, like, a full night's sleep, where day after day after day, not operating without that constant stress in their lives. So when you're raising a child with a mental health challenge, it's even harder, I think, because you're always worried about them. And you may be going from crisis to crisis. And we have families that we talk to who are talking about how, like, I have to hide all the knives in my house. I have to lock my cabinets for safety for my child and from my child. And it's hard, and you don't know who to talk to, because who do you talk to say, I have to hide the knives from my children? Who's going to get it?
And I think that's something that we try to keep quiet. We don't want to talk about it. We don't, like, that's personal, that's something that you keep quiet. I don't know who to talk to, right? And yes, we've had so many families like that, unfortunately, that have had to, have that experience of taking their son or daughter to a hospital because of self-injuries or suicidal thoughts. And absolutely, I feel like, that is the time that you really want to talk to somebody and get that help for yourself, because that's a very difficult time and you don't want to be alone.
I think one of the wonderful opportunities that we have as family support partners is kind of getting the parent to ground themselves a little bit and actually realize everything that they're doing. They're keeping a roof over their head, they're keeping the power on, they're still trying one way or another to get to work, earn a paycheck, taking care of groceries, and being able to pay for the groceries, go get them, bring them in the house, turn them into a meal, clean up from that. If we broke down what we actually did, we're doing so much, and we'd never give ourselves credit for doing all that. But then you add in an illness, a mental health diagnosis, a crisis, and some of that stuff gets pushed to the wayside a little bit, but almost all of it's still happening because it has to, even if you have someone step in and help you and, whatever that looks like. But actually reminding the parent when they reach out to us, one, we 100% know we were not their first call. They've been struggling. They've been trying to manage it. They've gone to all the places you would believe you can go to get help. And by the time they get to us, we know they've tried everything. I love the opportunity to remind them how many good things they have done, because we blame ourselves for everything. A mental health diagnosis that somebody has cannot be prevented. It cannot be just magically not there. It is not something you've done and caused this for your child to have that. That's another big thing. I struggle with my mental health, with depression, and I have a chronic physical illness. I blame myself for a lot of things. And I know like chronic illness is something a lot of our parents deal with. And being able to support them and give them someone to talk to that understands, even though you did all of these great things, it was so difficult and it was so hard. And reminding them you can do hard things. As much as it may break your heart that this is what you're going through, you can do this, and I'm going to help, even if I'm just listening, even if that's what I'm offering you, because sometimes that is the biggest thing we can offer, is that understanding and someone to say, I am so mad about this. It's okay. It's okay to be mad. You can be mad with me. You can cry with me. You can yell with me. I get that. And I know that we all do this job because we've been there. We know what that's like. And the idea of being able to like wrap your arms around someone and say, you got this. I'm going to be here. I'm going to help you navigate this, can be like the biggest gift in the world to be able to give to someone. But we approach it not that clinical way of these are the cut and dried answers and this is the medication and this is the days that this has to go on. We're going about it in a very practical way and that personal way. So we're not therapists, we're not doctors, we don't diagnose, but we see our parents. We know what they're going through. We know how much it breaks your heart, and you still have to show up in your life for your other children, for your job, for being able to sit across from that doctor and hear what this diagnosis is, or to sit across from a group of people and you're doing an IEP and you feel like no one's on your side. It's like you against everybody else. Being able to help our parents feel like that motivation and like sit up a little straighter and give them skills and knowledge that they can go in and do these things. And sometimes like crisis, when we're dealing with that, sometimes, unfortunately, it's where we're starting to teach them how to have a crisis plan, what to do next time, what we can do starting from this moment moving forward. And a lot of this stuff that parents have to choose to do, they know this stuff, but in the middle of a crisis, in the middle of having so much coming down on you, it's hard to think straight. So, whenever you have the opportunity and you're speaking with one of us, that is a great opportunity for you to say, okay, I'm going to think about this one thing that I have in front of me. I'm going to put all this other stuff to the side and I'm going to talk it through. I'm going to try to figure out what to do. And sometimes just having that opportunity of, I can say what I really think, I can say what I feel, and someone's going to listen and understand.
That makes a difference. I think the other thing that we have to keep in mind as parents is sometimes you go to the doctor. Sometimes you do go, you catch on, like Melissa said, you know that something is happening and you go to the people who are supposed to help you. You go to the doctors and you say to them, I'm seeing this happen, I'm seeing that happen. And maybe your medical doctor doesn't say, it sounds like maybe you should take your child to a therapist for an evaluation. Like sometimes the professionals who you think should help you get to the right place don't. And we know that. Look at how long it takes to be diagnosed with a chronic health condition. You go to the doctor and you tell them symptom after symptom, appointment after appointment, and they don't actually, whether it's listen or think right off the bat. It takes ages to get an appropriate diagnosis. That happens with mental health too. So you could be going to the doctors and you could be talking about something, you could be asking for help, and they're not putting it together, they're not pointing you in the right direction. I remember being at the doctor's for a well baby checkup, or maybe with my older child, and the doctor just off the cuff goes, oh, and come back when you want medication, ADHD medication for that one. Right. So first off, I was really insulted, because that's like not such a, and apparently this doctor did like studies ADHD, and that was part of what she knew, but that's not the way that you approach an ADHD diagnosis or symptoms with a parent, to say, I'm noticing that while we're here, your younger child is having a really tough time, you know um they seem impulsive, they can't seem like they sit still. So these are maybe some things you want to watch for, and if you notice that they're a problem, why don't you come back and we can talk, would have been a much nicer way than a snotty off the cuff comment like that. So sometimes even when you do ask for help, sometimes even the people who should be helping you aren't. So again, if a family peer support partner is not, we're peer support. We don't replace a doctor, a therapist, an attorney, an educational specialist. Although, we certainly do know all about IEPs. We do learn about special education ourselves because we know it's so important. But we are that person who can help you get your thoughts together and prepare for a doctor appointment, prepare for an evaluation, prepare to talk to an attorney if that's necessary, and then decompress with you afterwards, after the appointment. How did the appointment go? Did they listen to you? What are the next steps? Oh, okay, here, let us help you. Coordinate how you're going to call around then to get on a list to wait for a therapist. So because we have that experience, sometimes we can kind of look into what happened with us. And because we talk with our colleagues, we talk with each other and say, hey, I had a parent who had this, and maybe I didn't have that particular situation, but one of my team members did, and so we could tap into that knowledge. We have that experience navigating all those tricky landscapes. with that day-to-day experience of doing that while keeping dinner, taking care of our other children, keeping, our partnership alive and thriving, and kind of trying to take care of ourselves.
I know for my youngest, the doctor was like, when we finally realized that we needed to get her a diagnosis, he was like, oh, well, I knew she had ADHD like 2 years ago. And I'm like, why would you not put me aside and just go, you know what, I've noticed, like you said, Christina, and that was so frustrating to me. And I feel like it's really hard. And I know we were talking a little bit about this earlier, but my oldest daughter is 32. And when she was a teenager, she did get that diagnosis of ADHD. But now that she's an adult, they don't even want to recognize that diagnosis. And that is such a struggle for her because she's fighting still to this day to have them recognize that diagnosis. So I think that our job as family support partners are also to, when we're talking to family members, sometimes I feel like when they're talking to us, they have those answers and they say it out loud when they're talking to us. And I'm like, you do have that, right? You just have to talk to somebody and kind of speak it out, right? And we just validate those feelings,
But could you could you imagine a doctor saying to you when you go into an appointment, them saying, sorry, oh, I knew you had cancer 2 years ago,
Right,
but I didn't say anything. And I
right.
think I think that it's important to talk about, at least with us in our organization here in our state, we don't stop working with parents once their children turn 18 or 21, because we're here with our kiddos at 32. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter. And sometimes that's when things get a little different, because there's not that safety net where like a school is mandated to help with this or that. Also, I really want to say, like, they throw out this diagnosis of ADHD like it's no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they think like, oh, your kid is wiggly, they can't pay attention, but it is very, very different, and it could be really challenging for people well into adulthood, especially when
Oh, yeah.
we don't think that it should. Um, and often these things don't happen in isolation. ADHD may come with its best friend, anxiety and depression. Sometimes bipolar disorder can look like ADHD. And again, as peer support, not doctors, not therapists, we don't talk about a diagnosis, but we do talk about what makes a difference, your symptoms, and how can you as a parent help your child manage how their mental health challenge manifests itself, how it looks, how, we don't talk a lot about working with families with autism, but certainly that mental health component is important there. And how do you manage when your child can't get out of bed, doesn't want to take a shower, when they're too anxious, they really want to go hang out with friends, but they're very anxious about doing that. So that's something that, like, you can go to your doctor and they can talk to you about a medication, or like, you can do therapy. But really, talking with peer support, we can talk about, like, these are ways that I structured my house and our day-to-day living, or conversations with my child, so that we could live together and that they could learn how to thrive. And there was one more thing I wanted to say, and I forgot it. So go ahead, somebody say something and I'll think of it.
I think it's really important, like you just said, that we don't just stop when they turn 18. I feel like we never stop worrying as parents, and I think that it's even more important that we do talk to parents that beyond the 18 years of age. My 32-year-old, I do not stop worrying about. I still support, and I was so happy the other day. She was like, Mom, I graduated my certain type of therapy. And my therapist was so happy for me that I could move on to the next level. And that right there to me was such a milestone. It's like you graduating college or something. Because really, when they're an adult and they are trying to manage their own mental health, it can be a huge challenge. And like you said, Christina, ADHD is not just that impulsive can't sit still. It can be a disabling diagnosis. It's such a hard thing as an adult to live with, and especially if a doctor doesn't believe you have it, but as adults, we also want to support those families that have adult children, because that is also very challenging because you can't speak to the doctor the way you do when you're when your child's in therapy or so please give us a call because we are parents of adult children as well as young children.
I think
Yeah.
it's interesting. Some doctors or people think that when they have a child has a diagnosis, when they become an adult, it just magically disappears. Like it's not there anymore.
Yeah.
And what we've learned from like Mental Health America, different studies that they've done, is what happens is our children that become adults with these diagnoses, when they're not getting the proper supports, they learn to mask it, they learn to function, and then sometimes what can happen is they're self-medicating to just get through, to try to manage. There's so many things that can happen, and that person's just trying. They're just trying to get through the day, trying to get through the week, whatever that looks like. But there are a lot of supports if you know where they are, if you know where to go for these things. And if you're not being led to believe that just for ADHD as an example, it's just gone when you're no longer a child. And as an adult, you're faced with even more decisions, and it can be like paralyzing for someone that there's so many decisions in front of them, they can't make one. Like, how do you move forward when there's 20 decisions in front of you? You know, teaching someone to break things down and just concentrate on one thing at a time. Um, I feel like there is a lot of people out there struggling and they don't realize it doesn't have to be this difficult. There are things that you can do and supports out there. But I think a good deal of our children, when they become adults, they're trying to parent themselves, they're trying to possibly medicate themselves, and it can get very messy, trying to navigate this world without the support that you need. We see it with little kids, we see where they get a report card. There's like a report of how well they're doing or not doing. When they become adults, we got to look at it in different ways. Are they losing their job or not being able to pay their rent? Being unable to take care of themselves, with hygiene, or, constantly running out of gas and they're alongside the road. Just so many things. Like, it's different when they're adults because we're not getting that report. But there's definitely a lot of signs, that we can look for. And of course, we can see things when we look back. It's hard in the moment to kind of see those things. But there is a lot of wonderful supports for adults that have mental health crisis, mental health diagnosis. Um,
It's just
and
finding them.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so we're going to wrap things up, but I want to say two things. Number one, peer support is a thing. People are using what they have learned by living, and they are sharing that knowledge, and they are able to walk alongside people. We provide parent peer support, and obviously that when we talk about parents, we mean adoptive, foster, kinship, We mean that loving aunt, cousin,
Mhm.
neighbor who sees a child struggling and brings them in to live with them. You are in a parenting role. You love that child and care about that child. We see you. We're there to kind of talk with you. But there's also youth peer support. There's
Mhm.
also adult peer support. So if while you as a parent are working with a parent peer support, a family support partner, you can also have your child work with a youth peer support partner, or if your child is an adult, a peer support partner as well. So, I mean, I love that people could really kind of sit and say, I know it's really annoying that, your mother tells you to this or that. And I know it's really annoying. You're like 22 years old and you're living at home and, you can take care of yourself. And it's probably really annoying that your parent tells you to do this or that. And so the their peer support partner can talk to them about ways of managing, and while we're listening to you and kind of brainstorming ways of handling things differently. So I love that. But parting words of wisdom, and let me just mention, because this is what I wanted to mention before and I forgot, now I remembered it. um, Sometimes as parents ourselves, it's helpful if we talk to someone with that lived experience who knows what we're going through, because sometimes we see those signs and people like poo poo us. I waited a long time to consider giving my child medication because I had heard from people who did not know, who were probably thinking what they thought to be logical. Don't give your kids drugs because then they'll grow up and they'll be addicted to drugs, when they weren't thinking about like ADHD as medication. And we wouldn't say that about don't give your child insulin because they're never
Right.
going to learn how to make their own. Like we wouldn't say that. So sometimes people hear things and they think that they're giving you advice, but they don't know. They didn't live it. They're just guessing or hearing what they've heard. Parent peer support partners have been there. We've heard. We can go out with you and say, I don't know if that's true or not, but let's look it up together. Let's figure it out together. This is who we can ask and come back. So I think that that's where peer support is really helpful, because we understand, and you maybe we can help you dispel some of those urban legends and wives' tales that maybe are holding you back when you ask. But ladies, do you guys have any wisdom to send off with our audience?
I wanted to say thank you for bringing up that other peer support, because it's really important for children to have somebody else besides a mom or dad or an aunt or grandma to walk alongside them. They've been there, they've done that. That peer support can be able to help them feel their feelings and understand what they're also going through. I know my daughter, who's 17, has had that peer support person, as part of their journey. And hopefully, I hope maybe someday she can be that peer support for somebody else, because I feel like that's such an important part of their journey, not to feel alone. We as parents, we have our parents, and we can talk to other parents, but that youth, it is so important for them to feel like they're not alone. And that's stigmatized, like that there's something wrong with them. That peer is so invaluable. It is so important for them to feel like they're not alone. So thank you, Christina, for just bringing up that peer support, as well.
I think it's important for people to know that when they call us, one, we are not judging you. There is nothing you could share with us that we would be judging you for, and we're not telling you what you should do.
Yeah.
Sometimes a parent will call and they're kind of on the fence there about medication. Just as an example, since Christina brought that up, I'm not going to tell you that you need to give your child medication. I'm going to help you learn as much as possible so you can make an educated decision. I'm not going to push that this is the answer and you need to do this and you need to call this place. and it's all parent led, but nobody's going to try to like change your mind about something. We just want to support you and help you make the best decisions that you can. And sometimes having someone to talk that out with, makes all the difference.